This is Syrian Girl. The media is painting the refugee crisis as an acute issue, but the Syrian war and refugees have been there for 4 years. And Aylan wasn't the first child refugee to drown. Why is there such a media push now? Well, it's just in time for when France... So they're using sympathy for this child's death to drop bombs on more children while crying crocodile tears over them as they run from those bombs by the US. Rupert Murdoch couldn't even wait for Aylan's body to go cold before he started exploiting it for more war in Syria. So, before you wave refugees welcome while letting your government get away with murder, there are a few things you need to know. The whole Syrian war and refugees were caused in the first place. In spite of this, politicians and the mass media are blaming the Syrian President Assad for Europe's entire refugee crisis and using that to convince people that there needs to be a war in Syria. But how can Assad be blamed for the entire refugee crisis when the majority of refugees aren't even Syrian? And some European politicians are exploiting the war in Syria to push for an open border immigration policy. So was it the Syrian government that caused these refugees? Or was it these same politicians and their liberal interventionists that are now crying over the refugees' deaths? People like Angelina Jolie, ironically the ambassador of the UN refugee program, it was also Amnesty International who claimed Gaddafi was using black immigrants as mercenaries. It was these same liberal interventionists who in 2011 supported Al-Qaeda-affiliated rebels in Syria, and they dare yell, "Shame, shame, shame," for not letting in the Syrian refugees. How about shame on you for ruining our beautiful country? The refugee crisis didn't start when Syrians tried to cross into Europe, but when Europeans tried to cross into Syria to join ISIS. But the so-called coalition on ISIS is a lie. The US and its allies have no intention of actually defeating ISIS. Instead of working with the Syrian army, the only force capable of fighting ISIS on the ground, they are preventing the Syrian army from doing their job. Only 4 years ago, Syria was a well-off and prosperous country that even accepted 2 million Iraqi refugees. Now, we've become the refugees. Syrian refugees want your help, yes, but to get back home to their own country. Shouting refugees welcome, while well-meaning, is not enough. You're not going to be able to airlift 10 million Syrians into Europe. Displacing them further from their country is not ideal for anyone. The refugees want to come home. Hear them out for yourself. To help them come home, you need to pressure your government to stop the war in Syria. The government wants refugees to return and have put forward a plan to do so. They have asked for help in implementing that plan. Blaming the refugees themselves for the wars NATO creates is not the solution. Suddenly, so many people are disrespecting Syrians. There are forces that want to estrange people from their homeland and dissolve national identities altogether. Obama and other criminals are trying to make Syrians a people without a nation. A people without a nation suffer the worst humiliation. Look at what happened to the Palestinian people. One day, it could happen to you. So, defending your nationality doesn't mean disrespecting the nationality of others. By demonizing Syrian refugees, right-wing nationalists are handing liberal interventionists moral victory on a silver platter. People are sympathetic to that boy and his family, and any group that demonizes them comes off as being sociopaths and alienate everyone. For example, people ask me, why don't the Syrians stay in Turkey? Well, Syria with no prospects of a future. Numbers are very high, but want to continue sending terrorists to Syria. People are also asking, why aren't Syrians being helped by other Muslim countries? Well, Turkey and Jordan have taken 1 million each. What these people are really asking is why aren't the rich Gulf Arab states accepting Syrian refugees? Because in the words of this Kuwaiti politician, we Syrians have the Gulf lifted a finger to help Palestinians anyway. While it is true the people of the Levant have as little in common culturally with Arabs as they do with West Europe, this doesn't change the fact that it is the Gulf Arab states that caused the Syrian problem by backing the terrorists. But why doesn't Israel take any refugees? After all, it's on Syria's border and it's in the Levant, Syrian people's historical land. I guess Israel is the only country in the world that's allowed to be racist. It's funny to hear Zionists talk about how Europe needs to accept Syrian refugees when they won't even let Palestinian refugees return to their own homes and villages. I've also heard, why Germany, not Greece? Well, I'll let this Syrian refugee tell you. The most honorable are the Syrians still in Syria fighting for their country. But how can one blame those that run if they themselves aren't fighting with a gun in their hand? It's time to point that finger inward. Save your nation and stop your governments from starting these wars.